Now we're going to learn how to sample. Not just sample, but sample well. The very basis of sampling in statistics is the simple random sample. When we do this, each individual in the population must have an equal chance of being selected. If you haven't had a chance to be selected, then bias has occurred. There's different ways to do this. One is called the hat method. You can substitute a hat with a box or anything that either is like a hat or metaphorically is like a hat. You would take, for example, number all the individuals, then put their numbers in a hat, and then select however many numbers you want from the hat. Or you could just put the names of the people. If you have a very small group of people, put their names in a hat. Another thing we can do is a random number table. Now the back of your textbook has a random number table. Almost every statistics textbook has a random number table, and it would be the same idea. We're going to number all the individuals, and we're going to let the table do the selecting. The third way you could do it would be to generate a list from a computer and let the computer do it through its random number generator, its internal function that will do that for you. Each sample, though, is going to be different, and this is just an example of sampling variability. Another way to sample is with a stratified sample. Now, strata are groups of similar individuals. So imagine this. Imagine that the school has said that we're going to change prom. And with COVID here, we are going to have to change prom. But instead of just asking a simple random sample of the whole school, let's say that you want to get each class's opinion about how we should make the changes. So you might do a simple random sample in the categories of freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So that would be a total of 20 people taken from each of 4 groups. Each of the groups is, in this case, a strata. Or maybe a more realistic example would be if the school has 1,000 freshmen, 800 sophomores, 600 juniors, and 400 seniors. We could modify our simple random samples to be proportional to the sizes of the strata. What do strata do? Strata reduce the sampling variability. They ensure that every important group is represented. Now, here's an example of what we mean by strata. In Dodger Stadium, when you go to get a ticket, there are many areas of the stadium that your ticket could come from. It could come from the outfield, the left or the right field pavilions. It could come from the field boxes, the ones that are really expensive. What happens in each of those strata, which is basically represented by a different color, the tickets cost different amount. The desirability of the tickets is different. Another way to sample is called the cluster sample. A cluster, you think of a cluster of grapes. They're all near each other, and a cluster is a sample chosen by its geographic nearness, or you might call this neighborhood sampling. Here's an example from the text. In assessing the reading level of a textbook, a reading book, you might select a few pages, and those pages would be clusters out of the book and assess them. So for example, you might take a few pages out of Dr. Seuss and look at them, assess how difficult they are to read. You have a pretty good idea how hard the book is or how easy the book is to read. Then you might take a few pages out of Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare. It only takes a couple of pages to realize you're in a whole different level than Dr. Seuss. So those pages, because they're near each other, they're in the same neighborhood, they make a good cluster. So we might sample a number of clusters. The clusters, the idea behind them is they are miniature versions of the population. They are what you might call a microcosm. In other words, one page of Shakespeare is representing the entire either play or maybe even the entire work of Shakespeare. Now, here's some pictures of what we're talking about and the difference between strata and clusters. On the left-hand side, you have a picture that is probably coming from Utah, probably southern Utah, or maybe northern Arizona. And each color represents a different geological time. And they have different colors because there's different mineral deposits in each one of those lines. Well, those lines are called strata. That is stratification. And the idea with a stratified sample, you take a sample from each one of the colors, or samples from each one of them. Now on the right-hand side, where you have the grapes come in clusters. They are geographically near each other. When you take a sample, you take the whole cluster. You do not take a sample of the cluster. The cluster itself is the sample. And you might take many clusters, many samples. Now, another kind of sampling that seems pretty prevalent is the idea of systematic sampling. Sampling every second or third or seventh or 20th. And how you might do that is on an airplane. For example, you might, if you're looking for, say, whose carry-on is overweight, you might take every 7th or every 10th individual, weigh it, and see if there's some kind of a discrepancy there. This works well when there's no other relationship present.
The ultimate showdown between this season's top 10. Check it out.
What's the dream here? I'm here because I want to show nothing's impossible for me.
We worked so hard to get to this point.
Wow! I've done this a long time, and this is one of the most incredible things I've ever seen on any shows.
America, welcome to Hollywood!
It's a really, really special guy. There's something about it.
What you do with your hands, oh, amazing.
A year ago, I was performing for one dude eating a pepperoni pizza.
If there was ever an X-ray classmate, it's you.
The last 20 seconds was magic.
How do you draw the breaths? I'll show you after the show.
This was the best performance of the night so far.
Glennis is wrong.
I never dreamt we'd find times like this. I just want to scream. This next 3 minutes can and will change your life.
Now, first of all, that's the wrong kind of pole. That said P-O-L-E. They meant P-O-L-L. Okay, but besides that, what could go wrong in that kind of a poll? Well, is it a simple random sample? No. Does every individual have a chance to be selected? No. Some people don't even know about this show or didn't know about it in 2018. I certainly didn't know about it until I went looking for an idea for a video to show you. Okay, so this is definitely not a simple random sample. Is it a stratified sample? Does it take different groups within the population and ask them their opinion? No, it doesn't. It asks everyone their opinion. Okay, and then the last, so it's really asking for a census. And in the last thing, clusters, no, this showed across the nation. So there was no idea of geographic nearness or whatever. There are a lot of things wrong with taking a poll like this if you claim that this is how America feels, or this is how such and such a country feels. If you want to do it just for entertainment, by all means. And they did. So let's do this question now, and I'll let you think about it, and then you should pause the video, think of the answers, and we'll come back. I'll read the whole thing to you. It says, for each scenario below, name the type of sampling. We need to survey a random sample of the 300 passengers on a flight from San Francisco to Tokyo. A, pick every 10th passenger as people board the plane. What kind of sampling is that? B, from the boarding list, randomly choose 5 people flying first class and 25 of the other passengers. C, randomly generate 30 seat numbers and survey the passengers who sit there. Or D, randomly select a seat position, the right window, the right center, the right aisle, etc., and survey all the passengers sitting in those seats. Let's see what the answer is in a moment. Pause the video now. Alright, let's look at the answers. Picking every 10th passenger as people board the plane would be systematic sampling. B, choosing 5 people flying first class and 25 of the other passengers separates the passengers into 2 different strata. This is stratified random sampling. C, randomly generate 30 seat numbers and survey the passengers who sit there. This is classic simple random sampling. And finally, randomly select a seat position, the right window, the right center, the right aisle, etc., and survey all the passengers sitting in those seats. That would be an example of a cluster. And we're going to get all of the passengers sitting in one of those seat positions. And so that is the geographic nearness that they are clustered into. So as a recap, here are the answers.